Hello, my dear friends. Hello, my dear listeners. How are you all? So, today we are here to read the second part of the story Pushpamala, the Wreath of Flowers. This story is taken from Bengal fairy tales written by Francis Bradley Birt, and this book was first published in the year 1920 and it was illustrated by Abanindranath Thakur. So, till now, what we came to know that somehow the king and the kotal, both of them, they were atkure. That means they didn't have any offspring, but somehow they got their offspring after a long waiting. And in that crucial hour, king and kotal, they were in the in between or in the mid of uh, hunting, and there king by some momentary whim, he just taken an oath that if he got a daughter and the kotal is good, if he got a boy, then he will give his daughter, then he will give his daughter to the kotal's son, so that they can be married, and they can live happily ever after. But when in exact situation, when king got a very beautiful, very charming daughter named Pushpamala, and when they grew up, and um, and became 15 years old and became 15 years old, then one day the first germs of love was germinated in the hearts of these two young people. And when the kotal son demanded about demanded about demanded to the king so that he can fulfill his oath, but somehow he was just um thrown away from the palace. So what happened next? So let's start. Just about the same time, Pushpamala, pursued by her mother, came down to bathe, and fate led her to the same tank. On finding the leaf floating, she took it up and read what was written on it. And so intense were her feelings that she swooned away. One of the maids attending on her ran into the palace uh, with the intelligence, and the king and the queen hastened to the spot. Restoratives were administered with success, and the princess was taken home. She remained silent and sullen, however, for the rest of the day, and spent a sleepless night. Next morning, both she and the Kotal's son went to the Patshala and took their respective places. The tutor, finding something unusual in their demeanor, asked them to explain it, at which Pushpamala showed him the leaf, and both of them asked his advice. He said that as the contract it contained had been entered into by their fathers, and as their mothers had also bound themselves by a promise, they must fulfill it. At this, the princess left her throne to her lover and sat on the floor at his feet, and though there were no lessons that day, they remained there till the usual hour of dismissal, when each of them, making valuable presents to the Guru, went home with the mutual understanding that they would leave the country together during the ensuing night. It was arranged, therefore, that the Kota's son should wait at the foot of a particular tree whence he was to give the signal of his presence by playing on a flute. The night came, and the princess was subject to such feelings as generally work in the mind of one going to take so serious a step as that of leaving her parents and her home with all its dear associations. Her heart palpitated and her whole body trembled. The last duty she thought of performing for her parents and the other inmates of the palace was to cook the best dishes for them and to serve them with her own hands, and her mother, unable to divine her motive, attributed her self denial to a childish freak and permitted her to act in her own way. She had finished cooking and serving the meal when she heard her lover's flute, as if saying, O princess, how long wilt thou be sleeping? It is midnight, hasten or the morning star will rise, and our plans be foiled. But as yet she could not go out, for the sentinels were still awake. It was midnight, and the flute was heard again. Yea, stars and trees, witness that I am waiting for my sweetheart, and that she is delaying. Oh, that she may not forget her promise. Then, at the beginning of the fourth watch of the night, when the flute sounded once more, Pushpamala changed her clothes, tied her jewels in a bundle, and whispered to herself, Stay, stay, my friend, stay a little while for this unfortunate maiden. In the first watch of the night, I cooked the night meal. In the second, I served it out. During the third, the guards were awake, and now the fourth has come, and I step out to meet thee. Little canst thou conceive my feelings on leaving my parents? They will weep themselves blind at my absence, and just as the cow lows for her young calf, so will their souls cry after me. Then the longed for meeting took place, but the lovers did not at once proceed on their journey. The Kota's son, seeing that the dawn was not far off, induced the princess to take him into the royal armory and stables, where he selected two good swords and two winged horses for himself and his beth- betrothed. betrothed. Then, disguised as two soldiers, they started with the speed of an arrow, and on the fourth day in the evening reached a grand mansion, which was the habitation of a king, dacoit king, his old mother and six brothers. The brothers were out on a plundering expedition, leaving their mother at home. She saw the two riders approaching the gate and instantly accosted them, saying, My children, my people are out, and I am here alone. Make yourselves, however, quite at home. After that, she placed before them some oil to be rubbed on their bodies in preparation for the evening bath, and when they seemed somewhat refreshed, offered them food. But the girls said that as they never ate anything not prepared by their own hands, they would cook themselves. At this, the dacoit's mother, who had seen the valuables on the persons and horses of her guests, and from this had guessed that they were worth robbing, gave them such materials for cooking as would detain them longest, so that her sons might in the meantime come home and do with them as they pleased. She gave them such fuel as would take long to ignite, and such rice and dal as would not soon boil. Pushpamala commenced cooking under these disadvantages, and her face and eyes were swollen at the smoke from the oven. She was very ill to ease, and her lover, who had gone for a bath in the tank near the house, was in a similar plight. The old woman had thrown water on the stairs on four different sides of the tank to make them very slippery, and he could ascend them only after several falls and bruises. He smelt danger, and from outside the house gave the alarm to Pushpamala, saying that she must cook sharp and see that the horses were not removed. He then came in and helped her to finish cooking as soon as possible, and both of them, having gone through a hurried meal, got on their horses and galloped off. But the woman they left behind was too clever to be buckled. In order to enable her sons to track the fugitives, she managed to tie to the horses' hind legs very small, hardly perceptible bags of cloth filled with mustard seeds and perforated in order to allow the escape of the seeds. The lovers did not notice the trick, and so they rode on unaware of the danger, leaving the old woman in a frenzy at the delay of her sons. She waited a long time, and then she resourced had recourse to the plan previously arranged between her and her sons of making a bonfire in an emergency as a signal to them to come home. Accordingly, she set fire to a stack of straw lying by, which quickly burnt into a red blaze and instantly brought the dacoits home, not lenting, not letting them dismount not letting them dismount, she seized hold of the reins of their horses and turned the heads of the animals towards the road taken by her guests, telling her sons in the meantime of the mustard seeds that they would surely find on the way. They took the road pointed out to them and, overtaking the fugitives, made a fierce attack upon them. But such was the princess' dexterity, dexterity in using the sword that she cut off the heads of six of them. The remaining dacoit, the youngest of the brothers, with a dried bit of straw which he found lying on the way between his teeth, implored her to spare his life, on condition that she would even remain her slave that he would even remain her slave in return. The Kotal's son recommended the bestowal of this favor, saying that it could not do any harm. But the princess said, "My dear, remember that the sages have said that to leave unpaid the least portion of a debt, not to extinguish the last spark of a fire, to spare an inveterate enemy even when he is at his last gasp, are as foolish as for a person to approach blindfolded a yawning abyss. Do not tell me to spare the fellow. He, her lover, in spite of the warning, persisted in his recommendation, saying that even granting that the robber's patience was all pretense, he singly could not injure them when they were two together. And Pushpamala at last relented. They then rode forward with the robber as their groom, and finding a large piece of open ground with a beautiful tank and an orchard attractive orchard, the Kotal's son suggested that they should take a bath and satisfy the cravings of hunger by eating some fruit. The princess yielded, though unwillingly, and they both got down into the tank, leaving their horses and shoes and swords on the bank in charge of the groom. This ruffian this ruffian taking advantage. This ruffian taking advantage of their temporary inattention took up one of the swords and cut off at one stroke the head of Pushpamala's lover. The murderer, having by some means seen through her disguise, cast in her teeth the fate of him for whom she had left all, and asked her to be his. The girl, knowing her danger, controlled her grief and pretended to be glad at the request. The robber then took his seat on the horse of the deceased and invited her to do the same. But she said it did not look well for her to be on the horse that her new lover rode, and that therefore she would ride her own horse with her own sword in her hand to resist any unforeseen attack. The fellow, too foolish to see through the pretense, agreed to the agreement, and by the time he had gone a few years, his head fell deserved, deserved from his body. No longer in fear, the princess had time to think of her irreparable irreparable loss, and wept and cried, rolling on the ground with her lover's head held close to her breast. But she had not to weep long, for he was restored to her by Parvati, who, it happened, may be gathered from the following dialogue between the goddess Shiva and her husband. My lord, said Parvati, I hear a woman crying. Who may it be? Nobody cries save one in grief, replied Shiva. But what is that to us? While passing on our way, you notice everything. Come, let us pass by. No, my lord, urged Parvati. It is not for me to pass by when one of my daughters is in trouble. She may be a wife bewailing the loss of her husband, or a mother that of her child. My heart bleeds to leave her without consolation. Saying this, the goddess willed herself to be taken to the spot whence the sound of crying came, and this being done, she saw poor Pushpamala dipped waist deep in the water of the tank and heard her uttering the words, Oh, my poor husband, gone forever from me. This was too much for Parvati, and she said to Shiva, Lord, she must have her husband back. So, what happened next? We will come to know in the next part. So, till then, be happy, be jolly. Ta da!